The first thing I want to do is just to make sure that everybody understands what the Fort Huachuca story is and why people are so fired up about it. Because obviously, I appreciate that not everybody watches my podcast. And there has been just such an aggressive, I would describe it as a misinformation campaign. A lot of people that are chasing rabbits. It has nothing to do with what we discussed on the show. And I do think it's important for people to also have the clarity of how quickly this all unfolded. So I did create this little timeline, which I just jotted down because if I make one mistake, then the internet jumps down my throat. It's weird. When you hear how this all transpired, you're going to recognize that it all happened very quickly and very aggressively. So I have told the story on my podcast. I hate that. This is just the reality of how it happened. Okay. So it was a holy day of obligation. And I did my podcast. Obviously, we do not normally go to mass in the evenings on a Monday. I think it was Monday. I think it was Monday the 8th. And we went. I literally jumped off air my podcast, ran to mass. And for whatever reason, maybe because it was just like later in the day, I didn't do my usual prayer, meaning that I normally start my prayers with gratitude, what I'm grateful for, praying for everyone in the family. And this time, for whatever reason, I just went with just basically pleading for a missing piece and saying, essentially that everyone recognizes that there is something very wrong with this Charlie Kirk story, but I just feel like there's like a small piece of this thing missing. And I was just deeply praying for a missing piece. I just want you guys to know that was truly the backstory. I then go home after mass, I sit in my bed and I open my laptop and there are literally 50,000 emails in my tips box. That's the old box. That's not even more tips. That's the old inbox. And one just pops in and it's from a woman and she just writes, I really think that you should call my friend Mitch. He has a story that you're going to want to hear. Okay. I never just, and someone drops a number, randomly call them. Obviously, I usually email back and I'll say, please give me some indication of this or that. I don't know what came over me, but I was like, would this be an answered prayer? And I pick up the phone and I call Mitch. And he's kind of startled. I don't think he was just maybe with this friend. And he's like, I can't believe I'm speaking to Candace Owens. And he then proceeds to tell me the story of how he was at Fort Huachuca Air Base dealing with an issue that happened 35 years ago when he discovered a cartel tunnel. And he happened to, and I want to be very clear here because this is important, there were only two people that he mentioned to me on the phone and he felt absolutely certain that he saw them. Okay. He said on the evening of the 8th, he saw who he then learned later on was Erica Kirk. He saw her at the Candlewood Inn and Suites on September 8th. She was with a younger guy who looked like he was in special forces. He talks about his watch. And the bigger thing for me was that the next day he said that he saw this meeting that he accidentally stumbled upon what must have been a very important top brass meeting. Essentially described it as like there were 12 to 13 O6s, and you don't see that much unless it's a very important meeting. And he described the meeting in military terms. The way that I understood it was basically this is like final hands on deck. We're about to go on, and there's going to be a mission. And he stumbled into this building by a long set of circumstances. He was going to get a coffee. He didn't realize that JTF had gotten back together. He struck up a conversation because he recognized the patch of the 10th Mountain Brigade. And eventually they tell him, oh, yeah, we're actually using this random offsite building. We're back together. It's now JTF Southern Border. And that's how he walked in. And at that moment, he was talking to people at the front desk. He saw Brian Harpole walking out of this meeting with somebody. And I'll tell you when we started talking about Mark Amadei, but he initially did not contact me about Mark Amadei or Cabot Phillips. I recognized Erica Kirk on September 8th, leaving the Candlewood Inn Suites on the base. And I recognized Brian Harpole on the 9th, the morning of the 9th. The meeting was concluding at 7:30 a.m. Now, obviously, because the September 9th, the way that he described it was first and foremost this is like we're about to do a mission. It's the day before Charlie Kirk dies. There's been a lot of speculation about Brian Harpole. He definitively has lied about things which are on my list. He lied about what they did to prepare for Charlie speaking, kind of showed the messages. He was a bit weird about that. I was going, okay, that's really the most compelling piece for me. It's like Brian Harpole, because I'm running in my head, okay, obviously the Erica thing could be interesting, but that's on the 8th. maybe Erica was with Dan Flood. I mean, she has security. It's Fort Huachuca. It's kind of in their, the Phoenix backyard. Maybe she's there for a different reason, picking something up. Her mother's sick. Her mother works in defense. Like, my mindset was just the Brian Harpole thing is the most compelling piece for me because I think he's been acting weird. And obviously, I was not going to just assume that I should have him on the show before I went through some basic fact checks. I ran it up to some person that I trust very much that is in government, that is in the military, asked him to vet the story. I mean, I was basically up all night dealing with this because I was going, oh my gosh, what if this is the answered prayer? And we are about to be able to assert definitively that Brian Harpole was there. So I did those sort of basic checks. And then it was December 9th. And I just told the story of what Mitch had told me. I did not mention Erica's name. That's very important because I did not, again, think that that was necessarily relevant to the meeting that had happened on the 9th. And I wanted to speak about Brian Harpole, and I just said it was a blonde girl. Um, Anyways, that's the 9th. On December 10th is the very next day is when Erica sat down with Harrison Faulkner on Fox News, and she addressed conspiracy theorists as sick and said that she wanted them to stop. And then suddenly I'm trending and people are like, well, she's basically saying that you need to stop. And I was like, okay, that's just weird. Then the next day on the 11th is when Barry Weiss used the snippet of the now infamous, stop, just stop, which the TikTokers went very crazy on. And I was like, okay, that was specifically obviously about me. It's like Barry Weiss said, the podcaster Candace Owens. And it kind of uh, backfired, I would say, on the internet. And suddenly, the next thing I knew, Erica and I had a date to meet on that Monday. So that was Thursday. That's the just stop snippet. Friday, I had no show. Sunday, I want to tell you this part because this is important. On December 14th, I received a text message from Ian Carroll. I hope he is in this chat. I'd like him to jump in case I get anything wrong here. But the text message was to me and my producer, and he was like, hey, like, I have something for you guys that I need to discuss. It's pretty urgent. When I got around to calling Ian, he told me that basically he had received information from someone. He didn't want to give me the name of the person, and that definitively, like, Brian Harpole was preparing some huge lawsuit against me. And I was like, that's really weird. And I think he said like some big like Texas lawsuit. I don't know but like basically it was like it's a big lawsuit and like, you're going to want to be careful talking about this. And I was like, okay, well, that just can't be accurate because that's not how lawsuits work. I know about lawsuits. And I said, I think someone's intentionally giving you bad information to try to scare me from talking about the Fort Huachuca thing anymore because I hadn't yet hosted Mitch to tell a story. But I had indicated that like I might do more with Mitch or I might pass him off to Ian Carroll. Next thing you know, Ian Carroll's getting a phone call and told that I'm about to get sued for mentioning Brian Harpole. So I thought that was like a little weird. And I basically said to Ian, I think, yeah, intentionally somebody gave you bad information. You first have to start with the cease and desist. And I don't factually know if what Mitch said was wrong. That ends. Monday is when Erica and I obviously had to sit down for 4.5 hours, and Turning Point kind of hosted a Q&A, which I thought was unfair and against the rules, I will say, because we agreed to not speak about anything. But that went on. Obviously, on the Tuesday, I came back and actually, let's go back to the meeting with Erica, because this is also relevant. During that meeting, I did not bring up the Fort Huachuca thing because I, first and foremost, needed to continue vetting various aspects of it, but also I have Brian Harpole's number. And so I was just going to text Brian Harpole directly. But it is worth saying that during that interview, Erica gave me Brian Harpole's flights and said, like, I know that you mentioned that you thought Brian Harpole was at this interview. Here are his flights. Now, you guys would later see those flights because Alex Jones then mysteriously has these flights. I took the flights from her. I thought it was interesting because I didn't bring up Fort Huachuca and I wasn't intending to bring up Fort Huachuca, and I hadn't mentioned Erica on the show. And I looked at them and I said, "Oh, well, this is not an alibi because the meeting ended at 7:30 a.m. and planes that left Fort Huachuca were back in Texas. The SAM plane, as we know, went straight to Texas, and I think Brian Harpole's flight left at like 3:42 or something in the afternoon in Texas. So I was like, this does not conflict with the idea that he could have been leaving a meeting at 7:30 a.m. So it's a pretty short flight to Texas. So I said that, and that was it. But I said, but thank you for giving me this because now I can tell people that I have these flights, and also that he doesn't like yet have an alibi for that morning. I just wanted to mention that because I feel like that's important. Anyways, obviously, when we went back on air on Tuesday, I recapped I was tired and what just kind of went through kind of the high points or the things that we had discussed. It was a very long meeting. On Wednesday, we broke the story about Charlie's car, and that we actually had exclusive photos of what the inside of the car looked like. On Thursday, I made the decision to have Mitch on my show. And the reason why we made that decision is because we were then working in the background to verify other aspects of his story, and we were able to do that. I now felt beyond confident. He had sent me all of his metadata. He had sent me, as you guys already saw, his ID cards, his former passports, his new passports. He even sent me. Now, I can't say that this Mexican person was in the cartel, but his story was that he was being hunted by the cartel. He certainly had a like court documents documenting that a Spanish person had broken into his home and whatever had happened. So I believed him. I believed his story. I knew that he was a Green Beret. Like I told you, I verified that information right away, and I knew that he had stumbled upon this meeting, and he thought this is why they were pulling him aside. They may have thought something else, but it was substantially true. Everything he said was substantially true. Whether or not he saw Brian Harpole, I don't really know, right? Now, of course, the decision to have him on, I was aware that I could not say to him, I felt that that would have been super inauthentic if I was like, hey, tell your story, but like, let's not talk about the fact that you think 100% that you saw Erica. Like, that would have just been inauthentic. And I feel like people know that, I don't know, you guys would have just like sussed that out in 4 seconds. So I understood, obviously, that we were opening a can of worms because people were going to be compelled, obviously, by the fact that potentially Erica Kirk was on the base the evening before, if you will, on September 8th. But again, my main thing was Brian Harpole. During that time, as we were vetting his story, he described the congressman. He thought he was pretty certain that it was a congressman of some description. And he described him what he looked like, glasses, about the age, and he said the height was 5'9". So we were sending him photos of congressmen that we thought could fit the bill, just so you guys know this. And he was like, no, 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 no. We sent him Amade, and he's like, this person looks very familiar. Like, this could be the person. Like, have you looked into his story? Like, do you think that this could be the guy? Like, this is the first person that really looks like the guy. And he said, is he 5'9"? And I Googled that and it said he was 5'9". I actually think Google's wrong on that. I think his height is wrong. I will say that now. But it's important for you to know that he did not initially come to us with Amade. We sent him photos. It was just Erica and Brian Harpole. Okay, so we have him on, obviously, and he says both of the names. And what happened thereafter is what I can only describe as like an explosion. I get contacted from somebody who's in DC, and they were very concerned and thought maybe somebody was feeding me bad information. And I was kind of interested in the phone call. Not going to name the person, but was basically like, worried about your security and things like that. And I was like, I think we're good. Like, we're just kind of vetting the story. Then on the 20th, and this is very interesting, these two YouTubers, Valhalla and Paramount Tactical, reach out to Mitch. And they're being super nice to him. And they're saying, or one of them said, and I don't want to mix them up, but we have the video of it because Mitch is predisposed to paranoia. And he recorded them. And I'm going to drop the conversations. I'm happy to drop them after this live. They're so nice to him. This is on December 20th. And they're not questioning whether or not he was in the special forces. They're not saying anything weird. And they're actually saying to him that I may be under foreign influence. And I'm like, okay, these guys are clearly not good guys. Or actually, the 20th is when he first told me that they had reached out to him and wanted him on his podcast. It might have been the 21st that they called him. I'll clear that up. But between the 20th and the 22nd is when they are suddenly calling him, and they're like, oh, yeah, we're just concerned about Candace. Okay, yeah, and you're gonna see in a couple of days he loses his mind and is suddenly speaking to exes and baby mamas like he's Jerry Springer, but that was the nature of their phone call. So I'm like, okay, that's weird. I don't know these guys. And then on the 22nd, I get another phone call from Ian Carroll. Oh, he's here. I'm going to add you, Ian. Add a speaker. I get another phone call from Ian Carroll, and this time Ian is like totally freaked, freaked as in like very concerned, because obviously like I have a good relationship with Ian Carroll, and to some degree he respects Valhalla. And he's like, look, I have this friend who's in the military. He has a YouTube channel, and he basically runs me through, and he's like basically saying that he wants to talk to me. And it was kind of said to me in a way that was like, if you don't kind of take this rope, like, and jump off of this Mitch train, like, what's going to come out about Mitch is going to be explosive, and you're going to like go down on the ship. That's essentially the vibe that Valhalla was giving to Ian Carroll, and basically like kind of demanding to get on the phone with me. And I was like, and then he starts talking about, first he said stolen valor. Like he was like, he was never a Green Beret. I was like, he absolutely was a Green Beret. I sent that up the chain in the government. Like, that's just not true. And it felt to me like they were clearly being quite aggressive with Ian on the phone, demanding to speak to me, demanding that I allow them onto my platform, talking about his like ex-wives. I was like, I don't care about any of this. And I said to Ian, this seems to me like they're trying to distract me with stupid stuff. Like, if he has something that is concrete that like Mitch somehow defrauded me or lied and did like definitively was not a Green Beret, then please just have him email it to me. And I said, and if he emails that to me, I will deal with it immediately. And I also made it clear to Ian that, because they were like, oh, then like she could get in trouble for fraud because she raised money for this guy and he wasn't even like a Green Beret. I was like, first off, he never asked me to raise money for him. So the idea that he was doing this to defraud me for money, that came out naturally when I was live. I said I would do a give, send, go, because I said people were going to start digging up things. Like, I just had a feeling like I thought it would be other people, but I just felt like, oh, let's like raise money for him. He had a tough life, whatever. And I had that court paperwork of what he was going through. So that was natural. And not only that, but the very next day, which I will show on my show this week, Mitch sent me an email the day after I started the Give, Send, Go. The morning after, he sent me and Skylar an email and said, thank you so much for raising money, but I do not want to accept this money from you. And he was very self-deprecating. He was like, I'm just a fat, ugly man, and I just wanted to help, and I don't deserve this. Like, I don't deserve this from the public. And then I called him and I was like, Mitch, this is kind of stressful. Like, I don't want to figure out how to like give people back all this money. And he was like, how about this? If the tip that I gave you proves fruitful, like if it's actually Brian Harpole or if it's Erica, then I will take the money. Otherwise, I don't want it. So he was never trying to get money from me. That whole, he's a fraud, he was trying to steal, like none of that is real. It's just completely made up. And again, I will drop the receipts of exactly when he emailed me the morning after. So yeah, that's what I said to Ian. And I was like, I just don't care about anything about his background at all. I want to know if they have anything about him not being Green Beret. I will obviously post an update and say this guy completely tricked me with his metadata and everything. They were unwilling to do that. They did not want to do that. And so that's when they started, I guess, talking to his estranged son from 20 years ago. I don't know. I don't know, because I knew that it was an intentional trying to pull you, like they want to bring you down in mud so that you don't go forward and you have to just focus on the facts. So that is the backstory of Fort Huachuca. We all then know what happens next. And Alex Jones jumps into the foray. He's talking about Mitch's history. He's putting out all this information.
Guys, so after watching Candice walk through this entire Fort Huachuca timeline, I want to be very clear about something from the beginning. Because a lot of people online are reacting emotionally instead of actually listening to what was said. What Candice presented was not a conclusion. It was not an accusation. It was a chronology. And the reason that matters is because timelines are where stories either stabilize or fall apart. The first thing that stood out to me is how intentionally she was about explaining why she even told this story in the first place. She started by saying she wanted people to understand what the Fort Huachuca story actually is and why people were suddenly so fired up, because not everyone watches her podcast, and misinformation was already spreading aggressively. That alone tells me she's reacting, not instigating. She's responding to what people have been saying, that to what people have been saying. Then she explains how first everything unfolded, and I think this is where people underestimate the pressure of what happened. This she literally says she jotted the timeline down quickly because if she makes one mistake, the internet jumps down her throat. That tells you she's aware, she's being scrutinized in real time, and she's trying to anchor herself to dates and facts, not vibes. When she says it all happened very quickly and very aggressively, I believe her because nothing about this timeline feels slow or organic. It feels reactive, defensive, and escalating. Then she explains the day itself, a holy day of obligation. She does her podcast, jumps off, run to Mars. She mentioned something small but important, that she didn't do her usual structured prayer and instead found herself pleading for a missing piece in the Charlie Kirk story. Now, whether you're religious or not, that moment matters psychologically. She's saying she already felt like something didn't sit right before any of these exploded. That's intuition, not evidence. But intuition is often what makes people start asking questions. Then she gets home and opens her laptop to 50,000 emails in her tips inbox. That alone tells you how much information flows toward her constantly. And then one message stands out, a woman telling her to call Mitch. What matters here is Candace's instinctive hesitation. She says she never randomly calls numbers dropped into her inbox. She normally asks for more information first that shows caution. That shows caution. It shows she doesn't usually chase stories recklessly. But she says she felt compelled. Almost jokingly, she wonders if it's an answered prayer. And that moment is important because it explains why she even took the call in the first place. Not because she was hunting drama, but because she felt there might be something she was missing. When she calls Mitch, she notes that he started. That alone doesn't mean anything, but it sets the tone that this wasn't a rehearsed pitch. And then he starts telling her his background. Fort Huachuca, cartel tunnel discovered decades ago, grounding himself in a context that predates the current controversy. Then comes the key part. He says there were only two people he mentioned to her on the phone, and he felt absolutely certain that he saw them. Certainty is dangerous and powerful. It doesn't make something right, but it explains why Candace took the claim seriously enough to vet it rather than dismiss it. He then says that on the evening of September 8th, he saw who he later learned was Erica Kirk at the Candlewood Inn on base. She was with a younger guy who looks like Special Forces. He even talks about the watch. Now, this is where I pause because this is not Candace asserting anything. This is her repeating exactly what she was told while making it clear it's his claim, not hers. Then he says that the next day, September 9th, he stumbled into what he believed was a high-level military meeting. He described it as final hands on deck, mission imminent, 12 to 13, 0 to 6 as that's very specific language. It's not vague storytelling. But here's where Candace's reaction matters more than the claim itself. She says the bigger thing for her wasn't Erica, it was Brian Harpole. That tells you where her focus was from the beginning. She even says out loud that Erica could have been there for a million innocent reasons like security, family, defense work, phonics proximity. She lists alternative explanations herself. That is not the behavior of someone trying to push a scandal, to be honest. Her concern centers on Brian Harpole's behavior because she says he had already lied about other things and acted strangely. That's a critical distinction, to be honest. Then she explains that before she even hosted Mitch, she ran basic facts checks and took the story to someone she trusts in government and the military to vet it. And to be honest, guys, that's due diligence. That's not reckless amplification. She says she was up all night thinking about whether this was an answered prayer, not excitement, but in fear of responsibility. Then she tells the story on December 9th, and this is one of the most important details in the entire timeline. She does not mention Erica's name. She repeats that more than once. She didn't think it was relevant to the September 9th meeting. She just said a blonde girl. That alone undercuts the idea that she was targeting Erica. Then the very next day, December 10th, Erica goes on Fox News and tells conspiracy theorists to stop. And Candace says suddenly she's trending and people are framing it as if she's saying something she didn't say. Here's my opinion. This is where the story derails, because instead of clarifying, the response escalates. Then on December 11th, Barry Weiss uses the just stop clip explicitly naming Candace Owens. Candace noted that it backfired online, but it also locked her into the center of the narrative. At this point, the issue isn't Mitch anymore. It isn't even Fort Huachuca, it's Candace. Then she and Erica scheduled a meeting, and during that meeting, which lasted 4.5 hours, Candace says she does not bring up Fort Huachuca. That's important because if she were chasing a gotcha, that would have been the moment. Instead, she continues vetting. Erica gives her Brian Harpole's flight information. Candace examines it and concludes it's not an alibi because the Times don't actually contradict Mitch's account. Now this part gets twisted online, but Candace never says the flight proves guilty. She says they don't settle the question. There's a difference. Then the pressure campaign starts. Candace gets a message from Ian Caro saying Brian Harpole is preparing a huge lawsuit against her. Her reaction is skepticism, yeah. She says that's not how lawsuits work. She suggests someone may be feeding bad information to scare her. I agree with her here. Lawsuits don't materialize through whispers and warnings. They come through lawyers. Then she points out something else very critical. She had not even hosted Mitch yet. So why the urgency? Then after she hints she might do more with Mitch or pass him to Ian Caro, suddenly Ian himself is being warned that Candace is about to be sued for mentioning Brian Harpole. That feels less like legal action and more like intimidation. And guys, one thing I'll have to say on that is, I'm a little curious. Why was Brian Harpole so afraid? What was he so afraid that Candace Owens might uncover if she continues digging into the story? That's the question on my mind. Does it mean that, he's guilty of all the things that Candace Owens was accusing? Does it mean that he was guilty of all the things that Candace Owens was talking about? And, instead of, talking around saying that, she'll sue Candace Owens and all that, why didn't he even, just go straight to Candace, with the lawyers and just, send her a lawsuit? Like, what is, the question that a lot of people could be asking in their minds is, what could Brian Harpole be hiding behind closed doors that he doesn't want Candace Owens to uncover or else to discover? Yeah, guys, that is the question that I've been having. And then Candace Owens even said that Brian Harpole was going around, telling people he's going to sue her, but he didn't even send Candace a cease and desist. Isn't that just something else? I just don't know. Guys, tell me, what do you all think about that? Then comes the YouTubers. Candace describes them as friendly on the surface, but what they are actually doing is calling Mitch repeatedly, suggesting Candace is under foreign influence and implying catastrophic consequences if she continues. That's not journalism, that's pressure. And then Ian Caro calls Candace again, visibly shaken, telling her someone in the military community wants to talk to her and is basically wanting her to jump off the Mitch train or go down with it. And this is where Candace's response earns my respect, to be honest. She didn't panic, and she said she doesn't care about personal drama, and all she wanted was, to get more information regarding that story. And guys, one thing I would say about Candace is that she's one confident woman, and you can tell that this story is actually a very strong story. To be very honest, it includes powerful people, but Candace Owens feels like what we were told was the cause of Charlie Kirk's death could not have been the cause of the death. And according to her, what we were told was the cause of death was just a narrative, and that there were powerful people behind the death of Charlie Kirk. And for her, because Charlie Kirk was her friend and her very dear friend, she wants to get Charlie Kirk's justice. And that's powerful, to be very, very honest. And if that's her true motive, then I would say that she's a true friend, because even in death, because even even with her friend having passed away, she's still here trying to dig more to the story. And honestly speaking, that is something that shows that this woman is a true friend. If her true intentions are really just trying to and to tell what, or to investigate what really happened to Charlie Kirk. Anyway, guys, may Charlie Kirk continue resting in peace, and may perpetual light shine upon him. Then, guys, let me continue. She tells Ian, if you have proof Mitch lied about being a green beret, send it to me. I'll deal with it immediately. That's the correct response. Then came accusations that she defrauded people by raising money for Mitch. She explains clearly that Mitch never asked her to raise money, that it happened organically on a live stream, and that Mitch emailed her the very next day refusing the money. That detail matters because it directly contradicts the fraud narrative. She even says she'll release receipts. At this point, the pattern is obvious to me. When the facts don't shut the story down, the strategy shifts to character attacks, intimidation, and distraction. By the end, Candace says she realized people were trying to pull her into the mud, so she would stop focusing on the facts. And honestly, that's exactly what it looks like. This doesn't mean Mitch is right about everything. It doesn't mean Erica did anything wrong. It doesn't mean Brian Harpole is guilty of anything. But it does mean the response to this story has been disproportionate, chaotic, and revealing. Then people are confident the truth is on the when people are confident the truth is on their side, they clarify. They don't threaten, they don't panic, they don't mobilize proxies. And that's why this story hasn't gone away. Not because of conspiracy theorists, but because pressure without clarity invites more questions. not fewer. And until those questions are answered calmly and directly, people are going to keep looking. That's not dangerous, that's human. Anyway, guys, that's all for now for today's commentary. I'll update you with more news. Please go ahead in the comment section and tell me what you all think about how Candace Owens explained the whole Fort Huachuca story. And what's your opinion about the Fort Huachuca story now that you have heard it clearly after she explained it so well? Let's meet in the next one. I love you all and may God bless you.